All right, it's time to talk basketball. I'm Jose Salviati, editor at thepeachbasket.net. He's Steve Purciello, a longtime high school basketball coach, educator, vice principal, and athletic director. And this is the 13 Rules Random MBA Thoughts podcast. Best 15 minutes of NBA random thoughts online anywhere. If this is your first time listening, welcome. We're glad you found us. This podcast was born out of the content in Steve's NBA Random Thoughts articles, which he produces weekly. Steve and I have exactly 15 minutes to discuss what's on his mind around the NBA. Now, we know it's the offseason, but there's still a lot going on around the NBA. So today we'll discuss his latest 13 Rules Random NBA Thoughts article with a focus on the second apron, as well as a few additional random thoughts. Steve, you ready?
Ready.
Let's do this. I'm starting the clock now. All right, let's go with the first topic, and the one that I think every NBA fan has been talking about, may not know exactly what it is they're talking about, though. That is this dreaded second apron in the CBA. NBA fans have been hearing a lot about it. What is it in general, and why could it have a negative impact on established stars moving forward?
I believe it was the Stop Steve Ballmer rule they put in the last negotiation, which was 2 years ago. This will be coming into the third year. What it did was, not only is there a tag, but now there's a second apron where it's, like, I don't know exactly how many million more, but if you go past that apron, it really inhibits you from doing anything. For example, there's no trade exceptions where you can make it, if somebody signs with another team, you get the exception back. You can't do that. Here's a big one. Every year in February, guys get bought out. They get traded, they get bought out.
Right.
If you're making more than mid-level exception, which was $12 million last year, and probably it's going to go up. If you make more than that, those teams that are in the second apron can't get someone. So that kind of restricts them where they can't get help down the stretch. You can't buy draft picks. You can't pay cash for any trades. You can only sign the minimum salary. Once you go above it, for example, Boston this year is above it. And Cornette, Tillman, the guys they did sign or re-sign, they couldn't re-sign for more. But anybody they could bring in had to only be at the minimum. So everybody else picks through the good players, and you're left with the guys that really nobody wanted. So it really is so many restrictions. The other thing, too, is if in 3 out of the 5 years you are in the second apron out of 5 years, 3 times, if you are, your first round pick moves in 7 years, your first round pick moves to the end of the first round. So think about this. And we can use a bunch of teams, but if you are a team that's shooting for the title now, for the next 3 or 4 years, and you're above it, when things fall apart in 7 years or get worse, you lose that. Is lost if it's an earlier pick. It becomes the last pick of the draft, first round. So there's so many restrictions on it, plus tag. I believe the Golden State, who was in it. In fact, this year they got out of it. And I'll get to the point on that. But Golden State was paying like 4 times whatever a salary is. So if they sign somebody for $3 million, that's a $12 million tax. And that money, that tax money, goes to those teams under the salary cap. So you can be a bad team, but you're going to make money. And I'm going to use the Charlotte Hornets when Jordan was owning. Michael Jordan owned that team. He made money. He made a lot, and he sold it for a lot of money, but he made a lot of money. Now, here's the point I made in the article, though. The worst part about this, the Warriors were restricted in trying to re-sign Klay Thompson. He is a time Golden State Warrior. Even if they win a title in Dallas, people remember him as a Warrior. It's a shame when a guy they can't sign, the guy they drafted, worked with, got better and better as an all-time star, and he has to go to somebody else. Now, let's project in the future. Let's just hear Jason Tatum might be a good example where Boston can't sign him anymore.
Right.
It's really like Nikola Jokic. Who knows? Although that's another story about Denver or where they are with the cap. But the point being, these great players who they're linked up with their team, they might not be able to keep. So there's so many dreaded parts of this thing that it's terrible. As I said, the bargaining agreement still got seven more years. So they can't even change or do anything because it's really hurting. And it also restricts teams from making deals and all the other things because of all the rules inside. So just so many negative pieces to it. And you won't see a dynasty because of this, like the Golden State Warriors. I don't think you had one like.
And I think that's by design, right? I think that's probably a big part of why this is there. They don't want to see a dynasty. They want to see kind of some parity around the league, which, to get that.
There was a fear of Steve Ballmer coming in because for him, it's ass money when he gets taxed.
Yeah.
So, they're afraid that he would just, I don't care. I'm going to buy the best players in the world and I'll pay the taxes. But, that was the restriction. And from what I've been reading, Clippers are very, very aware of that tax. And that's one of the reasons why with Paul George, they were hesitant because they didn't want to go back into.
Yeah. Yeah, and staying in LA, right? LeBron just signed. He purposefully signed for $2.7 million less to keep the Lakers under that second apron. I think every team is aware of it, and every NBA fan has heard of the second apron, but not very many of them know what it's about. I'm still kind of fuzzy, but this was a great encapsulation, and it's unfortunate that it cost Klay Thompson an opportunity to end his career at San Francisco.
I want to make you aware of something, not you, but people, anybody listening. If you take the Knicks situation, they didn't win a title yet. They're paying out 45 or so to 43, whatever, to Anunoby. Brunson's contract, he's got 2 more years on it, but Brunson will make 50 or 60 million. Now, already with 2 guys, you're 100. Bridges has only got 2 more years. He's going to make more money if the Knicks re-sign him. When you begin to look at this, the Hart makes 17 million now. You start adding it up. They will be in that unless they get rid of some of these people. They will be in that predicament. So it's a problem, and especially like if the Knicks have money, an organization. If you didn't win a title and you've gone into that, my goodness, that's not a good situation.
Well, this is as good a segue as I can make out of that and very interesting topic. But you talked about the Knicks. Let's talk about Isaiah Hartenstein, right? He just signed with the Thunder, and he has said, it was a hard decision for him to leave New York. I imagine it was. He seemed to be at home there, had great success there. But now he's with a Thunder team that, man, is arguably the best team in the Western Conference. Without him, and now they've got him. So I got to ask you straight up, does adding Isaiah Hartenstein make the Thunder the favorite in the West?
I think them in Minnesota should. Edwards will get better. Towns is beginning to fit into his role, although Gobert will be Gobert. And they also made that trade for Dillingham, and if he's decent, Conley doesn't have to play as much. So they're going to be good. Oklahoma City, though, all of a sudden, Chet Holmgren's a 4. That's where he belongs. He's not the biggest guy. And I don't know if he can handle the banging, but he's not going to get banged as much. Now you've got Hartenstein. So all of a sudden, in Oklahoma City, my goodness, with Alexander and so on, they're loaded. And they're experienced now the playoffs. So you can't look at it and say, well, they're a new team going into the playoffs. So I guess they would be a favorite, but I wouldn't throw Minnesota out. But boy, they're good. Oklahoma City's just going to get better.
Yeah. And let's, for all intents and purposes, just mark them the winners of the Paul George trade. I think that is, at this point, you always say you want to gauge a trade, the success of a trade 2-3 years later. Here we are. The Thunder won. Speaking of Paul George, he's now in the Eastern Conference, right? He is lined up with Embiid, Maxey, a very good Sixers team. Does adding Paul George to that already good 76ers team make them the favorite in the East?
I'll say no, with exceptions.
Okay.
If anybody's going to be hurt.
Sure.
All it takes is a Brunson or a Porzingis or Tatum or any of these people to go down, but I still think they're the 3rd best team in the division.
Even healthy.
I think Boston has got too much for him. There's 5 deep. And I think Tatum and Brown are pretty good. And don't forget, I think they'll have a better record because those guys will play more games than Embiid will and George during the season. But I think the home court will be big. I think it'll be a closer series. I think the Knicks, I still kind of like the Knicks over them, but I'm not sold on that. But I think, they're all in the same ballpark. And I think if any of them meet each other, that home court's going to be. So, but I don't think they are, because don't forget, you have Embiid and you have George, but because of that dreaded salary cap, the apron, they did sign Caleb Martin the other day. They do have Gordon. So they picked up a few players, but not that deep. In fact, they just got rid of Paul Reed. So I don't know what they want to do as backup center. And what Embiid's going to miss games. It's George. So, all of a sudden, without those two, you saw what it looked like last year with just Maxey, with the rest of them.
Yeah.
And the rest of this cast won't be as good. They did, again, Oubre's another guy they kept. But they lost some, some talent there. Lowry and what's his name? Harris.
Tobias Harris.
They lost him. So, it's interesting. George is a great player. He's 34.
Yeah. No, I think the East is tough. I think the West is tough. It's just a great time to be a basketball fan, man. Let's finish with this. And I hate to end on a sour note, but we're going to talk now about 2 teams that met in the Western Conference Finals in 2020. One of these 2 teams went on to win it all that season. The other of those 2 teams that we're going to talk about won it all 3 years later. Talking about the Los Angeles Lakers and the Denver Nuggets. You called them out. What is happening to these great franchises over the last couple of years?
First of all, the Lakers, I think for me as a fan, I look at it, the Lakers don't have anybody outside of Austin Reeves and Davis and LeBron that anybody wants. Now, sometimes you're surprised. You see somebody get traded and, like, my goodness, he's not that good or whatever. But it's obvious, they're offering everything they can to try to get some people, and they can't get them.
Right.
It tells you something. Unless they want to give up Austin Reeves, I don't know exactly where they're going to go. They need more. Don't forget it. He's great, but LeBron's 40. How much more? So, it's a problem. It really is a problem. And you really got to be creative or be lucky that somebody wants D'Angelo Russell or Rui or Hachimura or one of those people. Really, just not happening. As for Denver, I think that's a big shame. Stan Kroenke owns the team. Last I looked, he's earned, or he has, his net worth is $16.2 billion. He owns 10 other professional sporting teams, soccer and throughout, the world and all. But last year, he lost Bruce Brown and Jeff Green. Didn't want to pay him, obviously. What that did, it hurt him. He doesn't want to pay tax. He doesn't want to go above the cap. So, and if he does, he want to minimize his tax. Now, this year, he lost Caldwell Pope. Last year, they tried to get by without him, and you saw Denver ran out of gas in Game 7. They won it by 20, and they lost that game because they were using guys they only had 5 really guys, 6 guys maybe that Malone trusted. Now, they lost Caldwell Pope is a good player all around.
Yeah.
They're good open shooter, doesn't overdo his role. He's happy in that role, and he plays it as well as anybody. They lost him. I don't know how they're going to replace that if they don't want to pay. So Kroenke not spending money and trying to keep them where they are is going to make them lose their title years. And for Jokic, that's a shame because he's great. And one more piece to that's interesting. Jamal Murray's up for a new contract soon, another year, I believe. They're looking $55 million. He gets Porter's contract comes up, they're not going to sign.
Right.
Just play the game here with the money, unless something crazy happens. So, not a great situation, I guess, to say the least.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what's tough is, both teams are good. Obviously, Denver is better, but I think the Lakers are in that in-between stage. I would rather obviously be a championship contender or rebuild, right? To be in the middle, right, where you're not good enough to be at that high level, but you're not bad enough to get a lot of first-round picks. That's the worst place to be, and that's where the Lakers are. They're just mired in the middle.
In sports, it's very interesting. The Lakers, and I'm going to use the New York Yankees, they refuse to want to rebuild.
Right.
And what you get is average. And for the Lakers, their hope is they can sign when they, if LeBron retires or whatever, they can go out and sign the best free agent. That's their hope. And it's not a way, you build through a draft and you build like through trading, like Oklahoma City, like the Celtics have been.
Right.
You watch the pieces get better and better. I think the process to watch is more fun.
Yep.
The results.
Yep. Undeniable. And in LA, we were kind of robbed of that process when everything was blowing up. Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, Josh Hart. I can go on and on and on and on. And, here in LA, we say it worked. We got the championship in 2020. But, that when you look at, totality of the last 4 or 5 years, that was an aberration.
Plus, didn't you win this year, the tournament? No?
That's right. That's right. The Lakers are the in-season tournament champions.
It's wonderful. They should.
Right. I'm going to let it end on that note. You heard the buzzer go off. Steve's got the last word as usual. That's it. Our time is up. Make sure to read Steve's entire article. We'll make sure to link it below. This might be our final 13 Rules Random Thoughts podcast until something happens during the off season. But we're definitely going to continue to talk basketball. We've got a continuation of the show, 13 Rules Overtime, where we're trying to introduce you to basketball players you might have heard of but don't know a lot about. We've talked Wilt Chamberlain. We talked Sam Jones. We're talking... Who are we talking next?
Rick Barry.
Rick Barry.
I'm the one that's supposed to forget, not you.
We're talking Rick Barry next. Make sure to add us, like, subscribe. All that stuff helps a ton. And join us for 13 Rules Overtime, Rick Barry. We'll be back in a little bit to record that show. But we'll be on weekly talking to new player throughout the offseason. All right. That's it. Thanks for the time, Steve.
Take care. I had